Celebrations in the streets of Tigray's capital in Ethiopia as rebel forces take over the city. But after 8 months of fighting, can the two sides agree on a ceasefire? Hello, I'm Arnold Naidu, and this is The Heat. The conflict in Tigray has killed thousands of people and displaced more than 2 million. Both sides have been accused of human rights violations. The United Nations has called for a negotiated ceasefire and a political solution to the conflict. And then there's this, allegations that the government of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed deliberately set out to isolate and starve the people of Tigray. CGTN's Guram Challa picks up that story.
Answering questions to the outgoing MPs, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said despite the false narrative of the army left because it was defeated, the decision to leave Tigray was made to give the people there and others time for reflection.
The truth of the matter is it's a must to give time for reflection, especially for our people in Tigray. We have to allow farmers to do their work, and we must not be the reason to prevent that activity. We should not be blamed for human rights abuses anymore. We have done lots of positive things in Tigray, including the training, arming, and assignment of a police force there. The army is not city police and has its own missions, and that is concluded for now.
Abiy said some in the international community were unfair to Ethiopia and even tried to sabotage the constitutional order and the leadership of the country, aiming at a regime change.
We won't be walking on the road others paved for us. We know some nations have attempted a regime change. Our message for such a nation is as long as Ethiopia stands still, the issue of individuals holding power is secondary to us. Instead of being a mercenary government, we 100% choose to face whatever challenge comes our way. But that has no benefits. The people of Ethiopia have already expressed their desire.
The Prime Minister and the Parliament as a whole applauded what they called a remarkable job done by the Ethiopian National Defense Force. Abiy promised the army can still deliver on any front.
Ethiopian Defense Forces may not have F-22s. An army that can do information warfare may not be equipped with the latest GPS technology, may not have Su-35 or Rafale fighter jets, or the latest missiles or nuclear bombs. But one thing I can tell you for a fact is that the kind of bravery the Ethiopian army has, no one else has. That's a fact.
TPLF in Tigray has reportedly put 7 preconditions to be fulfilled before any peace talks can begin. Budget release, electricity and network services provision, and the release of prisoners are among them. Addis Ababa so far has officially said nothing on this, but some authorities said what Ethiopia calls a terrorist group must first respect the constitution of the land before expecting anything from the government. Group Chala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
There is much to talk about. Let's get straight to our panel. Abdullahi Boru Halakhe is an Africa security and policy analyst. William Lawrence is a former senior U.S. diplomat, analyst and program director. He's currently a professor of political science and international affairs at American University right here in Washington, D.C. Also with us, Henok Gabisa is a legal advisor for human rights victims in Ethiopia and a visiting academic fellow at Washington and Lee University School of Law. And joining us from Addis Ababa in Ethiopia is independent journalist Samuel Getachew. Thanks to all of you for being with us. And Samuel, let me start with you. As I said, 8 months of war has left thousands of people dead, at least 2 million people displaced, and hundreds of thousands facing famine right now. So take us back. How did this crisis start?
Well, it started last year in November. There was lots of accusation going back and forth between the Ethiopian side and the TPLF, who started it and what happened. And it was supposed to end in December, according to the Prime Minister, but it has continued. We've visited the area allowed by the Ethiopian government, and we've seen the impact this conflict has had on the people of Tigray. where a majority of them are facing, 91% of the population are facing food emergency, and about 900,000 people are facing starvation. So it is a conflict that began and was supposed to end and is still continuing, and we're approaching its first year in November.
So Samuel, this part of the country, this province, Tigray, is it cut off from the rest of the country right now?
Well, it's in the northern part. They've been having all kinds of back and forth between Addis Ababa and Mekelle. Again, when I visited Tigray, it felt to me like I was visiting a different country. And the impact, I mean, I like to focus on the humanitarian aspect of it. It's just as painful as you can find anywhere. And to those of us who lived during the Ethiopian famine, it's a reminder that Ethiopia might be heading to the famine that defined it for a long, long time.
Abdullahi Boru Halakhe, this is a battle between Ethiopian federal forces and rebels in Tigray. What do the rebel forces want? What's their goal?
I think we need to step back a little bit and to really get to what that led to where we are right now. I think there are two competing visions, if you want, for Ethiopia. The TPLF would want a decentralized state, but Abiy and people who support him, they want a fairly centralized state, and their argument is that will foster unity. However, until 1991 and then 1994, when the constitution was passed, Ethiopia was practically ruled from the center. In some regions, this is the first time that they'd used their mother tongue as a language of instruction, as a language of business, is after this constitution was passed. And so therefore, that is, the crux of the matter in Ethiopia right now. For the rebels, they said very clearly, when Abiy, as part of centralization of the state, said that, the TPLF, which was part of a four-way coalition, should be dissolved, the TPLF said, we are not going to dissolve our party. So the other three parties folded and they formed the Prosperity Party. And so the idea that, the argument has always been that, the trigger was the TPLF attacking the military base in the north, the Northern Command. That was just essentially a trigger. Before that, there has been a messing of, military and militia within the border of, Tigray region, as well as, the military from Eritrea. So therefore, what the TPLF is saying is we do not want to be governed as such. We want to be part of a decentralized state. And that is where I think the biggest problem is. And if you see some of the demands that they have made as part of the ceasefire, those are some of the still speak in that regard.
Abdullahi, just clarify the situation here. So the TPLF, what they're saying, well, they've been cut out of the political process right now, so they want more autonomy, but nothing close to independence, right?
I think also, again, if we get back to the Constitution allows for secession, but the threshold is fairly high. So if the current political differences is growing, and there is, both sides do not want to, look at this as, find a political solution, that is where we would potentially go. As it is right now, there are three, main steps that need to happen in order for us to probably get there. One is an impeded humanitarian access, which TPLF is calling for. And the second is really, mutual recognition of both Mekelle and Addis. And the third probably is, to go into a political settlement, and that can take different forms.
Right. Henok Gabisa, as I said earlier on, this has caused a massive humanitarian crisis in the country. What is your reading of the situation right now?
Yeah, thank you very much. In fact, there is a serious humanitarian catastrophe that is obviously leading to a man-made famine. As one of our co-panelists mentioned, there are 900,000 Tigray ethnicities who are subject to a serious harm at the moment. In fact, when a few days ago, when the Prime Minister made a unilateral decision to retreat back, or what he called is the ceasefire, what followed the next day was the destruction or the bombing of the main route or the main bridge, Tekeze River Bridge, that connects Western Tigray with Central Tigray. That's the only supply access for these people, and now we don't have that on ground-based access to the people for humanitarian supply. The only possible way right now is probably the airlifting or airdropping of the humanitarian supply. So I would also like to go back a few months and put into context what happened and how this thing started. One of our co-panelists mentioned that this is a clear clash of visions as to the approach of state building. On the one hand, the Prime Minister had the vision to centralize into a single hand, consolidate power based on the hegemony of the past imperial politics, while on the other hand, powers like TPLF, the Oromo Liberation Army, and other nations' nationalities do want to have a fair share in their local autonomy. So this conflict is now leading to what we are going to see, a violent disintegration of the country. And I don't believe this is in the best interest of the country, but apparently and unfortunately, that's where we are headed. You can also refer from the statement of the Tigray government. I wouldn't personally call the rebel group. This is a legitimate government that had been elected a few months ago before the war started. So it's really difficult to undermine or diminish them into a rebel group. They are not. They have been elected by 98% of their own people in a situation where the federal government postponed illegitimately and illegally the national election. So all of these complexities and political dynamics added together are really taking the country into unnecessary paths, probably redeemable kind of damage that we might take a long time to heal from.
William Lawrence, let's look at the broader implications of this. As we just heard, the Tigrayan forces have taken Ethiopian federal troops captive. In fact, they've been parading them in their capital. And now we also have Eritrean troops fighting on the side of the federal government. Is there a risk that this could escalate into a wider regional conflict?
Absolutely, yes. There's something like 12 countries that are affected by this conflict in the region. Ethiopia geographically is sort of a hub with spokes around it into all of these countries. So we have refugees fleeing in a number of directions. We have troops coming in from another number of directions. We have a number of countries that have recently experienced conflict that could be further re-destabilized by spillovers from this region. And let me just say that even though the Tigrayans right now are victorious and on the march, they're surrounded by Amhara troops which committed atrocities against the militias to the west, the Eritrean troops to the north, the Ethiopian army to the south, which may not have them encircled, but create a situation in which any sort of pushback by the Tigrayans, either for strategic reasons or for retribution, could have a domino effect, a sort of spillover effect. One of the most tragic things in all of this, in addition to the humanitarian catastrophe, which your other guests have been talking about, is the absolute lack of dialogue here. You have a government that's refusing to negotiate with its former partners from just 2 years ago in the governing of Ethiopia, and you have so many conditions laid down by the Tigrayans to have talks that those can't possibly be met either in the short term. And so this political impasse means that the humanitarian crisis will get worse, and the potential spillover effects regionally will continue to get worse until we have talks.
Samuel, as William Lawrence just told us, the Tigrayans have imposed a number of conditions for talks. Can you tell us about some of those conditions, and is the government's position simply no ways, we're not talking?
As Groom Chala, your reporter from Addis Ababa, mentioned, some of the conditions are the release of political prisoners according to the TPLF, and also some resources that were suspended once again, according to them, and also a recognition of the TPLF government that Henok mentioned was, according to them, elected in last year. But you also have to know and understand that the shortcomings of democracy in Africa, or especially in Ethiopia, is 98%, 99% of being elected is also the shortcoming of our democracy in Ethiopia. It's something that should be recognized. But they have laid out all kinds of conditions, about 7. There are more. Some of them are more specific. But the Ethiopian side has already declared them as a terrorist group, and they're not going to be in a position to negotiate with the so-called terrorist group. So it's going to be tough. The difference between the Ethiopian side and the TPLF side is day and night. I don't think there will be a negotiation that's coming up very soon, and the impact on the ground will be just increasing.
And Samuel, what is your assessment right now of the balance of power on the battlefield?
Well, what power? There's now a government in Mekelle. There's the Ethiopian government that's expected to be elected by an overwhelming support. There won't be any, we don't expect that there will be a serious opposition in Addis Ababa. So the balance of power is, again, Ethiopian politics is, even to us, those of us that have returned to Ethiopia, is confusing. It's something that we fail to understand.
Yeah.
But again, the impact on the ground is something that should be noted. There are many, many people that are being impacted. It's not just in the Tigray region. I know the focus is on Tigray. It's almost every part of the nation.
If I may interject here, there is no evidence to say that Abiy is going to be elected with an overwhelming number of people. For example, in the majority of the populous region, which is Oromia, there is no single opposition from the Oromo that has been represented. Jawar Mohammed, Bakale Garba, and all prominent Oromo political leaders are put in jail about a year ago. So it's obviously a sham election. So there is no, even by any standard of authoritarianism, this election will never serve Abiy some kind of authoritarian goal or purpose. So the balance of power that you mentioned earlier, now it's the guns speaking to each other. It's not a democratically dispute kind of agenda that we are observing here. Getachew Redda, who is the spokesperson for the Tigray government, has mentioned that the means of communication is already gone. And we've seen in Tigray how many the defense force of the Ethiopian army had been paraded on the street. That clearly showed a subdued kind of mentality from the Ethiopian side. So the thing, though, is for this to get out of the conundrum, international community has to put a pressure on Ethiopia to attend to the humanitarian demand, the electricity, the internet, the phone call has been disconnected. So these kind of things are very important. They're game changers.
Right. Abdullahi, what is your assessment, Abdullahi, of the political situation in the country?
I'm afraid I'll have to agree with my colleague in the sense that, you asked the question, what is the balance of power?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, here is, Abiy launching this war in November with a tremendous amount of fanfare. 8 months down the road, you've got, like my colleagues have said, that information is very difficult to come by. But estimates put to around 6,000 or 7,000 of government troops that have been taken as prisoners of war. That doesn't seem to me that the government has gained tremendous amount. I mean, some estimate puts to 7 of the 12 divisions of Ethiopia's forces have been depleted. 3 of them are not in great shape. We are being told, estimates again around 18,000 of soldiers from the government side has been lost. So I think from where we sit, I think Abiy and Ethiopia are in far worse shape than when they started. However, that's not the point. The point is now, where we are as of now, there is no way either side can militarily subdue the rest. What is required right now, like I had mentioned, is immediate unfettered access for the humanitarian, for people in need to be served, and the need is far greater. What we know is only drip and drop because of information embargo. And the idea that the Ethiopian government would blockade the Tigray people in the Tigray region, I think will not going to subdue them. And so I think that is very important because that will build the required momentum. Yeah, sure. I mean, like the distance between both sides is significant, but that will build the required momentum for next steps that could lead to political settlement. And that is not going to be easy, and that was going to take a very, very long time.
All right, William Lawrence, let's talk about the possibility of a political settlement. We've heard from the TPLF on several occasions that they do want a negotiated settlement. We know that there's also been tensions that have been running for a very long time between Prime Minister Abiy and the TPLF. The TPLF actually blames him for taking away their political power. Here is what a TPLF spokesman said on what they want from a negotiated settlement. Let's listen to this.
So we have to make sure every inch of our territory is returned to us, to the rightful owners. Second, we need to get all the services. It could be air services, it could be transportation services, electricity, telecom services, and everything. The people of Tigray, as part of the Ethiopian Federation, deserve every service the rest of the country gets, and there is no way we will negotiate about anything whatsoever until such time that such services are restored to the people of Tigray.
So, William, what are the chances of a political settlement?
Very low for the reasons that your other guests have said and the spokesman just said. Because think about this for a minute. They only control a certain part of their territory and the provincial capital, which they just took over, and all these other areas are occupied in various ways. And they're saying, we won't negotiate until we take it all over. So that means warfare in three directions. When they say we won't negotiate until we're recognized as the government of this region, when the central government has declared them a terrorist organization, that means more warfare. Almost every aspect, when you look at it, of the declaration is saying, if you don't accept us on our terms, you'll get more warfare. That means more warfare. I mean, there's really nothing in this formula which lends itself to negotiation. And I don't blame the Tigrayans. I blame the Ethiopian government for refusing to negotiate from the very beginning, when this could have been negotiated all along. I do agree with just about everything that's been said ahead of me by the other panelists, and I do believe that these elections were not free and fair for the reasons that were mentioned and other reasons, and we still have are yet to see the results because much of the elections are delayed until September. Many of the areas couldn't even hold a vote. So we're in a situation, though, and let me just add one thing that hasn't been said. We're in a situation where, one group is winning 90% of the vote here, 90% of the vote there. The Prosperity Party seems to be getting something like 90% of the vote. Those aren't free and fair elections where people are competing about ideas and policies. Those are elections where people are voting for who they feel can defend them in a security situation, in a war type situation, and their votes for ethno-nationalism. So I would just add to the discussion that this isn't just about autonomy in regions. Yes, it is about that, but it's also about defending one's ethnicity. And if the Tigrayans are going to defend their ethnicity against the Amhara people, for example, who committed atrocities against them, we're going to have a lot more warfare. The tough thing for the future of Ethiopia is, can we have political negotiations if there hasn't been retribution? Can there be political negotiations if you haven't gotten all of your territory back? Can we have a humanitarian ceasefire long enough to get food aid to 1 million or 2 million people, even though people's demands have not been met? That's the really hard aspect right now.
Right, Henok, very briefly, if you could tell us, I mean, these ethnic fault lines in Ethiopia, how deep are they?
But just generally, to say a few words about this, there is a solution. There is a constitutional solution for all these kind of problems that my colleagues were mentioning. If we see the Article 39 of the Ethiopian Constitution that had been agreed upon in 1991, which is the national social contract of the people, mentions that whenever there is an expense political process to maintain the state, I mean, the divorce of the nation's nationalities, if it's inevitable, it can be settled through the constitution. One of the preconditions for the TPLF that we saw a few days ago is that any kind of settlement should be based on the basis of the constitution. That clearly means that Abiy has to first accept and recognize the existence of the collective identity of Tigray and other nations and nationalities. Unless Abiy submits himself to this reality of diversity in the country, there is no way out of this problem.
Right, Samuel, we've got a bit of time left. I want to look at the possibility of outside intervention in this. The United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, he's been talking about this. He recently, for what he called a real ceasefire. And that's because the ceasefire that's currently there is a unilateral ceasefire that's been called for just by the federal government. This is what Guterres had to say. Let's listen.
I'm deeply concerned with the present situation in Tigray. It is essential to have a real ceasefire, and the real ceasefire paving the way for a dialogue able to bring a political solution to Tigray. The presence of foreign troops is an aggravating factor of confrontation, and at the same time, full humanitarian access and restricted humanitarian access must be guaranteed to the whole territory, and the destruction of civilian infrastructure is totally unacceptable.
So what do you make of that, Samuel? I mean, is there any role for an organization like the UN?
Let me just focus on, there's the Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia, which is uniting Ethiopians. I was at the polls visiting while Ethiopians were voting. Ethiopia is spending close to $2.5 billion, 100 billion Ethiopian birr in the conflict zone in Tigray. And the people that have died, that's what concerns all of us. I think Ethiopia has to focus. Ethiopia is no longer a regional state. It's an international country with a Nobel Peace Prize winning prime minister. I think this needs an international involvement. And what happens in Ethiopia will affect the region. And I think, personally, international actors should get involved and solve this so Ethiopia could move on and focus on the bigger ideas that unites every Ethiopian.
Abdullahi, you've just got a minute left. What are the chances of outside intervention solving this, perhaps initially with a call for a multilateral ceasefire rather than just one side declaring a ceasefire?
It's the only way. I mean, Henok said Abiy has to submit himself to the Ethiopia's constitution. Abiy also, they have been pushing back against, regional efforts from Kenya and AU to say that this is an internal matter. It's no longer an internal matter, and Abiy has simultaneously agreed to an external third party, be it UN or a hybrid of UN-AU, to be able to resolve this. And I just want to say one thing. I know we just left within a minute. What is going on in Tigray? It's what is capturing the headlines. But everything that is going in Tigray has been tried elsewhere. So the fault lines inside Ethiopia are so significant. It's just that the Tigray one get much bigger focus for obvious reasons. What is going on right now in the Oromia region is incredible, if not in scale of what is happening. So in Tigray region. So I think there is need for an external actor.
Samuel, very briefly, I've just, as Abdullahi said, we just got less than a minute here. Here we have Prime Minister Abiy, who was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for making peace with the Eritreans. Now he finds that his government is being accused of human rights violations. What happened here?
Again, what happens in Ethiopia is still a work in progress. The UN is getting involved, hopefully more. But I don't think the world will invest enough resources to find out exactly what happened. When this is done, are we going to build a museum for the dead? There has been lots of people impacted by it. And again, it's a work in progress. We're watching it closely. I hope we'll have access. We can report on it more.
Okay, and that's where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That is it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching.